You gotta ask yourself a question. Do I feel lucky?
You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
Nobody wants to change. Don't change anything.
But we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls.
They never will. Dictators free themselves, but they enslave the people.
Why are you guys so anti-dictator?
Our knowledge has made us cynical, our cleverness hard and unkind. We think too much and feel too little.
Son, we live in a world that has walls, and those walls have to be guarded by men with guns. Who's gonna do it? You? You can't handle the truth!
Imagine if America was a dictatorship. You could let 1% of the people have all the nation's wealth. You could help your rich friends get richer by cutting their taxes and bailing them out when they gamble and lose. You could ignore the needs of the poor for healthcare and education. Your media would appear free, but would secretly be controlled by one person and his family. You could wiretap phones. You could torture foreign prisoners. You could have rigged elections. You could lie about why you go to war. You could fill your prison with one particular racial group, and no one would complain. You could use the media to scare the people into supporting policies that are against their interests.
We're in hell right now. Believe me. And we can stay here, get the shit kicked out of us, or we can fight our way back into the light. We can climb out of hell.
Il viaggiatore eclettico. Continua ad ascoltare il viaggiatore eclettico.
There is a gift.
Nossa, gente, cadê esse rapaz? Cadê você, mano? Excuse me, lady. Can I ask you a question?
Sorry, I don't speak Spanish.
Excuse me? No. I just wanted to
I told
ask you.
No hablar español.
Oh, okay. Gracias. Where are you? You were supposed to be here 15 minutes ago. People are waiting to hear this podcast.
Get out of here. No, they're not. You have like 5 people listening to this.
Okay, that's not the point.
Listen, I know you're ringing.
But after I tell you what I got for you, you're gonna kiss my feet.
What are you talking about?
Oh, okay, I'm getting there. Wait a second. Remember that guy I talked to you about?
Oh, the hacky guy?
Yes. He gave me this USB.
What's that?
I don't know. Some eye docs. I talked to him, and he.
Wait, you talked to him? You mean through phone?
Yeah.
You weren't supposed to talk to him through phone. I don't feel good about this.
It's all good. Nothing's gonna happen.
Well, I guess we'll figure what to do after the podcast, okay? For now, let's start. Sounds good? Okay, ready? Welcome back to this podcast of the Eclectic Traveler. Thank you to all that listened to the second podcast. I understand the topic of consumerism got a lot of people thinking, even myself. The fact that the total US revolving debt after May of 2011 goes over $800 billion, which 98% of this debt is made of consumers.
Yeah, we get the point. We all spend money on stupid crap. We don't really care, and we won't really change.
Incredible. You know, regularly a consumer has an average of 3.5 credit cards here in the United States. And bear in mind that this number has been greatly reduced during the economic downturn. Prior to 2008, people of the United States averaged 5.5 credit cards. All this according to the Federal Reserve G19 report on consumer credit and consolidatedcredit.org.
Why do you have to trash the US? Talk about other countries as well.
I was getting there. However, the US, as the CIA refers it to be, the world's most powerful nation state. And as As long as this is true, I will hold a reference mark for good or for bad. Anyone will do that.
Yeah, you talk like if you were some kind of sort of scholar or something.
I'm sorry, but this is how things were from every nation that held that position.
Why do you even bother going over the same thing? You might think I'm a pessimist, but people that are already aware of this stuff are the ones that will listen to the whole podcast. And the ones that don't want to be bothered with this stuff simply won't tune in to what you have to say.
It is not about talking or pointing anomalies as the main objective, but to admit and be sincere about our human condition. After all, I wonder if I'm really free. And I try to analyze which areas of my life I'm free, considering the fact that the flavor of freedom might not be as I have thought. Am I really free? No. I am in the process of achieving such in different areas of my life. I consider myself, for instance, caged and enslaved by my psychological and material consumerism, my social ideologies, the community expectations over me, my dogmatic beliefs. Think how you can free others without slaving yourself, and free yourself without slaving others. Think of your thoughts. Are they really yours? If you claim you're free, to what extent can you stay like that? Let me ask you a question. Have you thought what our human condition is? Have you asked yourself that?
I don't get it. What do you mean? Like our characteristics?
Well, like our status as an individual and as part of society. Think about it. Are we really free?
I guess it depends on your area of your life. You have to be put in some stages.
Look at you.
Meaning as if we are free as a country, then as a humanity, then as a community, and then as a family, and lastly, and most importantly, as an individual.
I would argue that we have to look kind of like vice versa. From an individual point of view, all the way up to, country. And I'm sure you that are listening to this podcast have heard of psychologist Abraham Maslow and his 1943 paper named A Theory of Human Motivation, commonly known as Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs. This theory explains in the shape of a triangle what a human organism ought to achieve or has to take care of before finding self-actualization.
What do you mean by self-actualization?
Good. That's a good question. Maslow defined it by saying, what a man can be, he must be.
No.
For example, if you have a feeling that the pinnacle of your life must be to be a scholar or a well-known artist, it can only be accomplished if the needs below this strong desire are fulfilled. Before self-actualization, or the nirvana of our human existence, we have to feel or obtain ways to satisfy our essential needs. Maslow describes as the basic and bigger foundation of this theory to be the psychological needs, such as food, water, sex, sleep, etc. If these needs are not taken care of, you cannot move your way up to self-actualization. Then in the ladder of needs, we have the safety needs, like security, shelter, employment, morality, health, property, etc. After you satisfy these needs, then you can move up to love and belonging needs. That's the third stage, going from the bottom all the way up, where you feed the social circle of friendships, family, and sexual intimacy.
You already said sex twice.
Well, according to Maslow, there's a difference between satisfying the demands of your flesh, if you will, before the other person's needs, meaning putting your spouse's needs before yours.
Oh, okay.
It is a more refined sexual life, which is not really the main topic right now. Moving on, there is the STEAM stage, which is the last before self-actualization. And it's all about respecting yourself and have confidence in who you are since you accept your circumstances. After that, you have achieved true freedom, which leads to true happiness. You're no longer a slave of yourself.
Well, listen, this is a long process.
It sure is. Think, to what extent do you worry about things? I worry about my economic safety. So it means I'm long ways from freedom according to Maslow.
It sounds interesting when you think about failed states or places where the environment allows few to achieve this state.
Most importantly is to what extent are we responsible to create this environment, and to what extent the government has to do something about it.
Well, theoretically, some steps to find freedom. However, the question still is in the air, are we really free? What if we come to the top of a pyramid and we haven't achieved true freedom? Or even true happiness?
Well, according to Maslow, if you haven't achieved it while you think you are in the top of the pyramid, then you might have not be quite on the top as you might have thought. Self-actualization is just not being who you want to be, but being that which will make you feel human. More human, make you more connected to who you really are in this vast universe. If you are not happy, it means that you are in the steam stage, as you yet haven't figured out what will make you more human. Nelson Mandela said,
"For to be free, it is not merely to cast one's chains off, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others." Yeah, there are a lot of different kinds of freedom. Speech, religion, thought, press, etc. It goes on forever.
Well, let's go deeper. Listen to this mind-blowing quote from Angelina Jolie.
The truth is, I love being alive. And I love feeling free. So if I can't have those things, then I feel like a caged animal. And I'd rather not be in a cage. I'd rather be dead. And it's real simple. And I think it's not that uncommon.
Wow, Angelina bringing tears to my eyes. Wow. I think she speaks for a lot of people who wouldn't like to feel caged like an animal.
What if we live in a cage that inhibits our freedom, but it doesn't feel like a cage? Okay? Therefore, it makes us have a different sense of what freedom is.
What do you mean to live in a cage?
Think about it. Is there a possible way that we can get so distracted with pointless stuff would keep us away from seeing the cage, the real cage? After all, we don't need bars to be in a cage.
Do you think we are in a cage that feels like freedom?
I wouldn't be the right person to answer what freedom tastes like, because I myself am slave to different chains. The chains of dogmatic, skeptic ideologies, political and philosophical reasoning, inception of worthless ideas that consume and damage my sense of reasoning, and human orientation. Movies, magazines, living billboards are constantly telling me and you the way to find happiness, the way to be truly free. And thinking to wake up is hard, very hard. And those that can cope with reality passively, meaning not violently, tend to impose their ideas through terror. That is why consumerism is part of this cycle, because it keeps us away from looking at the real cage. Noam Chomsky is an American linguistic, logician, and philosopher.
Logician?
Well, a person that studies logic and human reasoning. Currently a professor emeritus of Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT, author of over 100 books, father of modern linguistics.
Yo, listen, we get it. But just out of curiosity, has he won a Nobel Prize?
The Nobel Prizes are becoming like MTV Awards. You just know that they're rigged. And if you haven't figured that out by now, then there's a serious problem. Perhaps in 30 years after Noam Chomsky dies, he will be awarded with some sort of Nobel Prize. But for right now, he's been labeled as too harsh in Western politics. And I mean, you have to listen to what he has to say.
Is there something wrong with that?
Well, analyze the equation. Let me give you an example. A president of a superpower nation, such as Barack Obama with United States, who leads the conflicts of dozens of civil wars and foreign wars and wins a Nobel Peace Prize? Are you kidding?
Really, what's wrong?
Well, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, it's like saying 2 + 2 = 5. A president, a leader of a coercive state, okay, winning a Nobel Peace Prize? Why don't we go ahead and make any president of any nation a Nobel Peace Prize winner? We can talk about it later, but it just can't be.
Okay. You were saying something about Chomsky?
Well, in his book Consent, The Political Economy of the Mass Media, and his documentary, Chomsky talks about how in the United States, and this is 100% applicable to any country, I mean Mexico, Brazil, Italy, any country, mass media are, and I quote, effective and powerful ideological institutions that carry out a system-supportive propaganda, function by reliance on market forces, internalized assumptions, and self-censorship without overt coercion. And when you and I are bombarded with all these ideas, well, you can really distinguish which ideas were initially yours or which ones were intentionally placed into you.
Oh, okay, like the movie Inception.
Yes, thus making you feel intellectually exhausted and passive, falling into oblivion state.
Oblivion, meaning the state of being unaware or unconscious of what's happening.
Good job, well described.
Yeah, I just googled it.
From Noam Chomsky documentary Manufacturing Consent, I have selected out of the 2 hours a few minutes that I believe are fascinating and very compelling. Listen carefully to the questions that the interviewers ask to Noam Chomsky and see how Professor Chomsky replies to them.
Perhaps I ought to begin by reporting something that's never read. The line about the arguably the most important intellectual in the world and so on comes from a publisher's blurb, and you also always got to watch those things, because if you go back to the original, you'll find that that sentence is actually there. This is in the New York Times. But the next sentence is, since that's the case, how can he write such terrible things about American foreign policy? And they never quote that point. But in fact, if it wasn't for that second sentence, I would begin to think that I'm doing something wrong. And I'm not joking about that. It's true that the emperor doesn't have any clothes, but the emperor doesn't like to be told it. And the emperor's lapdogs, like the New York Times, are not going to enjoy the experience if you do.
Good evening, I'm Bill Moyers. What's more dangerous, the big stick or the big lie? Governments have used both against their own people. Tonight I'll be talking with a man who has been thinking about how we can see the developing lie. He says that propaganda is to democracy what violence is to a dictatorship, but he hasn't lost faith in the power of common people to speak up for the truth.
You write in Manufacturing Consent that it's the primary function of the mass media in the United States to mobilize public support for the special interests that dominate the government and the private sector. What are those interests?
Well, if you want to understand the way any society works, ours or any other, the first place to look is who is in a position to make the decisions that determine the way the society functions. Societies differ, but in ours, the major decisions over what happens in the society, decisions over investment and production and distribution and so on, are in the hands of a relatively concentrated network of major corporations and conglomerates and investment firms and so on. They are also the ones who staff the major executive positions in the government, and they're the ones who own the media, and they're the ones who have to be in a position to make the decisions. They have an overwhelmingly dominant role in the way life happens, what's done in the society. Within the economic system, by law and in principle, they dominate. The control over resources and the need to satisfy their interests imposes very sharp constraints on the political system and the ideological system.
When we talk about manufacturing of consent, whose consent is being manufactured?
We can, to start with, there are two different groups. We can get into more detail, but at the first level of approximation, there's two targets for propaganda. One is what's sometimes called the political class. There's maybe 20% of the population which is relatively educated, more or less articulate, that plays some kind of role in decision making. They're supposed to sort of participate in social life, either as managers or cultural managers, like, say, teachers and writers and so on. They're supposed to vote. They're supposed to play some role in the way economic and political and cultural life goes on. Now, their consent is crucial. One group that has to be deeply indoctrinated. Then there's maybe 80% of the population whose main function is to follow orders and not to think, and not to pay attention to anything. And they're the ones who usually pay the costs.
All right, Professor Chomsky, Noam, you outlined a model with filters that propaganda is sent through and its way to the public. Can you briefly outline those?
It's basically an institutional analysis of the major media, what we call a propaganda model. We're talking primarily about the national media, those media that sort of set a general agenda that others more or less adhere to the extent that they even pay much attention to national or international affairs. Now, the elite media are the sort of the agenda-setting media. That means the New York Times, the Washington Post, the major television channels, and so on. They set the general framework. Local media more or less adapt to their structure.
What is this? What's going on?
What's happening? This is too long. Boring, ridiculous. How dare you feed me a bunch of liberal ideas?
Chomsky.
That Chomsky has a lot to learn.
From whom?
From outstanding critical people, such as Rush Limbaugh, Bill O'Reilly, even Megyn Kelly.
How dare you? I can't believe it. Rush Limbaugh, Bill O'Reilly, even that woman? What? Are you kidding me?
Wasn't Chomsky the one that said that if we don't believe in freedom of expression for the people we despise, we don't believe in it at all?
Yes, you're right. Leo Macron had it right when he said, "It is easy to believe in freedom of speech for those with whom we agree." Well, the point of the third podcast is to really question the variables that we are part of. Consider the precedence of our beliefs, your beliefs. Where did those beliefs come from? The genesis of our opinions. Is that really our opinion, or is it someone else's? The indoctrination and repetitive education model, the stereotypes and ideas that tells us we are truly free when we are in fact slaving ourselves. Wonder seriously about what makes us feel oppressed. And most importantly, to be continued.
Me and all my friends, we are all misunderstood. They say we stand for nothing and there's no way that we ever would. Now we see everything that's going wrong with the world and those who lead it. We just feel like we don't have the means to rise above and beat it. So we keep waiting, waiting on the world to change. We keep on waiting, waiting on the world to change. It's hard to beat the system when we're standing at a distance. So we keep on waiting, waiting, waiting on the world to change. Now if we had the power to bring our neighbors home from war, they would have never missed a Christmas. No more ribbons on the door. When you trust your television, what you get is what you got. When they own the information, you know they can bend it all they want. That's why we're waiting, waiting on the world to change. Keep on waiting, waiting on the world to change. It's not that we don't care, we just know that the fight ain't fair. So we keep on waiting, waiting on the world to change. Yeah, yeah. I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. Oh no, 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 we keep on waiting, waiting, waiting on the world to change. We keep on waiting, waiting, waiting on the world to change. One day our generation is gonna rule the population. So we keep on waiting, waiting, waiting on the world to change. No, we keep on waiting, waiting, waiting on the world to change. We keep on waiting, waiting, waiting on the world to change. Waiting on the world to change. Waiting on the world to change. Waiting on the world to change.
This was an acoustic version of Waiting on the World to Change by John Mayer. Don't wait too much. Change now.